I'm Brandon, your host, and tonight we begin a mystery wrapped in memory and moonlight, Widow of Fredrick Ellery, Part 1. Before we step into the quiet halls of Ashwood House, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. It's always a joy to see our storytelling circle grow from every corner of the world. Now, get yourself something warm to sip on. Tea, cocoa, or something a little stronger if the mood calls for it. Dim the lights, settle in, and let's begin. They say the Ashwood House remembers. Not in the way old homes groan with age or how the wind leaks memories through broken windows. No, this house remembers. It holds on to every whisper, every breath, every secret not meant for daylight. I first saw it in the fall of 1998. I was 32, a freelance architectural historian, hunting for forgotten places with stories buried under dust. The Ashwood House wasn't on any map. It wasn't on any registry or deed. It was as if it had slipped between the cracks of time. But there it stood, silent and sprawling, at the end of a gravel road choked by trees. The air around it hung heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I was warned, of course. An old man in the village pub muttered over his glass, "People don't come back from that place the same." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Warnings lose their edge when you've spent your life chasing the past. So I went. Alone. The house greeted me with a silence so deep it hurt. No birdsong, no insects, just the rustle of leaves and the quiet crunch of my boots on the gravel drive. The wood of the house was weather-beaten, gray and splintering, like the skin of something long dead. Windows were intact but dark, reflecting nothing. I stepped inside, and immediately I felt it, a presence, subtle and pressing, like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. The entryway stretched wider than it should have, as if the house bent space to confuse you. The floorboards creaked beneath me not in protest, but in recognition. A welcome of sorts. I told myself it was just my imagination. Years of reading into structures, of finding story in stone and timber, had made me sensitive, perhaps too sensitive. But that night, as I sat in the cold parlor with only my recorder and a flickering lantern, I heard the whispering. Not voices, not words, just the shape of sound, sibilant and close, as if the walls were gossiping about me. I replayed the tape the next morning. Nothing, except, at exactly 3 minutes and 32 seconds in, a breath. Not mine. Soft, wet, like someone exhaling behind me. I didn't sleep the second night. Not for lack of trying. The bedroom was clean, the bed soft, almost too soft, like it had been prepared for me. But it wasn't comfort that kept me awake. It was the feeling of being observed, like something just outside my field of vision was trying to remember my face. I turned on the recorder again and placed it by the window. Sat up with a notebook, hoping to sketch floor plans from memory, something to distract myself. But my mind kept wandering back to the breath I heard the night before. At exactly 3:32 a.m., I hit record again. This time, I spoke into the darkness. If there's something here, say nothing. I waited. Silence. Then, just as I moved to switch it off, a soft knock. Not at the door, not at the window, but beneath the floorboards. Deliberate. Rhythmic. 5 taps. I didn't sleep after that. In the morning, I returned to the village to ask questions, but no one wanted to speak. Except for her, Margaret Ellery, 79, widow of Fredrick Ellery, the last known owner of the Ashwood House. She invited me in, poured strong tea into a chipped porcelain cup, and spoke without looking me in the eye. He drew it, you know, she said. Freddie, every arch, every stair, every lock. That house was his obsession. Why isn't his name on any records? I asked. She smiled sadly. Because it doesn't want a name. The house doesn't keep names, only stories. According to Margaret, Ashwood was never built for living. Fredrick had wanted to trap a moment in time, his words. He was obsessed with designing a house that could fold memory into its structure, as if wood and stone could remember love, pain, grief. She told me he died inside it, quietly, alone, after Margaret refused to move in with him. It was never a home, she said, her fingers trembling. It was a mausoleum, a vault for memory. But Freddie thought he could control it. The past doesn't like being locked up. She offered me one more thing, a box. Inside, a set of keys. Not to doors, but to drawers. Secret compartments, hidden throughout the house. Blueprints, maps, diary fragments. And a letter, scrawled in Frederick's hand. If you're reading this, the house has chosen you. Whatever you do, don't trust the mirrors. They never reflect you, only what you fear you might become. I returned to Ashwood House before sundown, the box of keys tucked under my coat. It greeted me again, not warmly, but with a low hum, as if it had been waiting. That night, I slept, briefly, and I dreamt for the first time in months. In the dream, I stood in the same parlor, but the walls bled. Not red, but black. Ink. Words streamed down like tears. And in the center of the room, a man, his back to me, writing on the walls with a finger he dipped into the darkness. He turned, and it was me. Morning came slow and reluctant, as though the sun itself didn't want to look at the Ashwood House. I made coffee, black and bitter, and took stock of what I'd gathered the night before. 5 small brass keys, each one engraved with a Roman numeral. I started with the first. The key marked I fit a drawer hidden behind a loose panel in the study fireplace. Inside, a photograph, faded almost to sepia. A woman in a dark dress, standing at the threshold of the house. Her face blurred, not by damage, but as if the photo itself refused to preserve it. On the back, a single word. Clara. The second drawer, found beneath the stays, held a lock of hair tied with crimson thread. Human hair, long gray. The third was buried in the base of the grandfather clock. It revealed a crumpled note, water-damaged and torn at the edges. She walks the halls between 2 and 3. Never before, never after. The fourth drawer, inside the old writing desk, held an antique ring box. Empty. But the fifth drawer, it was hidden behind a false wall in the upstairs linen closet, nearly imperceptible. I might have missed it if I hadn't knocked on the panel and heard the faintest echo in return. When I unlocked it, I found only a wax cylinder, an old phonograph recording, far older than the house itself. Dated 1896. There was a phonograph in the attic, dust-caked but intact. I wound it carefully, set the cylinder in place, and let the needle fall. Static, then a voice. November, something. I fear the house has taken her. She weeps through the walls. I see her in mirrors that should show only me. Then silence, except for the whir of the machine. Then a sound. Not a voice, not words. Just a scream. Cut short. I stood there in the attic, frozen, the room suddenly ice-cold. The air around me seemed to breathe in. Not out. In. As if the house itself was inhaling. I descended the stairs carefully, the wax cylinder still in my hand. But as I reached the bottom, I noticed something had changed. The mirrors. Every mirror in the house, above the fireplace, in the hallway, even the small one in the bathroom, reflected the same thing. Not me, but a woman in black, standing perfectly still, hands folded. And in each reflection, she was closer. I turned away. When I turned back, the mirrors were normal again. My own pale, shaken face stared back at me. But I couldn't shake the image. I know the name now. Clara. Frederick's obsession. Margaret had said nothing about her, but I suspected there were things the widow would never tell. That night, I tried to sleep with the mirrors covered. Bed sheets, curtains, towels, anything to keep them from showing me things I didn't want to see. At 2:17 a.m., I awoke to a soft sound. A lullaby. Off-key. Faint. Hummed by a voice with no body. I sat up, heart hammering. Then I noticed the covered mirror at the foot of the bed. The sheet had fallen, and in the glass, Clara stood, closer than before. Her lips moved in silence. Then I heard the same 5 taps I'd heard the night before, this time at the door. I stayed frozen. Then a voice, from the other side, whisper thin, "You opened the 5th drawer. Now you have to listen." I didn't open the door. Not that night. I sat in bed, staring at the mirror, heart thudding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The voice didn't speak again. The 5 taps didn't return. Just silence. But I didn't sleep. By morning, the mirror was once again just a mirror. No Clara, no sheet, just me, and the echo of her humming still stuck in my head like a splinter. I spent most of that day going through Fredrick's sketches, blueprints tucked into the box Margaret had given me. The more I studied them, the more wrong they became. Angles that shouldn't exist. Stays that looped back into themselves. Rooms that had no windows, except for one. A small chamber on the 3rd floor, hidden behind the linen storage. Unmarked on the main floor plan, but clear in the sketch. Labeled only as Clara's window. I had never noticed a 3rd floor. But sure enough, just past the 2nd floor landing, at the end of a narrow hall I'd previously ignored, was a door. Locked. But one of the remaining keys, marked simply with AC, fit perfectly. The door opened to a spiraling stair, steep and tight. As I ascended, the temperature dropped. My breath misted in front of me. I counted 15 steps, then 20, then 25, far more than should fit inside a 2-story house. At the top, a small square door. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was barely larger than a closet. Dust hung in the air like fog. There were no furnishings, no clutter, just a single round window with warped glass and a child's chair facing it. The window was covered in scratches, dozens, maybe hundreds, as if fingernails or something sharper had dragged across it for years. And on the far wall, carved deep into the plaster, a single sentence. "She watches so she won't forget." I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But I sat in the chair just to see what Clara had seen. The view was strange. The house sits in a thicket of old trees, thick and tangled. But from this window, I saw none of that. Instead, I saw a garden, stone benches, a fountain, wild roses climbing broken trellises. But when I looked outside from any other window in the house, there was no garden, only dense forest. This window didn't show the present, or even the past. It showed memory, Clara's, and I wasn't alone in that room. Behind me, reflected faintly in the warped glass, stood her shape, blurred, watching. I turned. No one, but the chair I'd been sitting in, it had moved. It now faced the opposite wall, pointing directly at the scratched message. "She watches so she won't forget." I fled the room, sealed the door, but as I descended the stairs, I heard them behind me, the unmistakable creaks of footsteps following close, too many. That night, I dreamt again. I was in the house, but not as it is now, as it was, lit by oil lamps, walls polished, wood gleaming, and Clara, walking the hall, face obscured, always just out of reach. I followed, and she led me to the parlor, to the fireplace, where flames flickered, not orange, but blue. She pointed. I woke up gasping, my pillow damp with sweat. It was still dark, still deep night. I went to the parlor, lit a lamp, removed the ashes from the hearth. And underneath, beneath a false stone slab, I found it. A diary. Clara's. The cover was scorched. The pages brittle and blackened at the edges, but still legible. The first entry read, "He built this house to preserve our love. But the house does not love. It holds." And when I tried to leave, it made me forget where the door was. The diary shook in my hands as I read. Not from fear, though I felt that, but from something deeper. A kind of horror that doesn't come from ghosts or shadows, but from the thought that someone, once real, once alive, had been trapped by something not of this world. By memory itself. Clara's entries were brief, sparse, like her thoughts had to be hidden, even from the page. Each entry seemed scratched down in moments of clarity, like the house allowed her time to remember, then stole it again. There is a door that leads nowhere. It appears only when you forget why you're looking. That line wouldn't leave me. It made no sense, not logically, but neither did most of what I'd seen in Ashwood. The geometry was fluid. Space rearranged itself. The same hallway would be longer one day, shorter the next. Doors that once open were now bricked up. Light would sometimes fall in the wrong direction. I began searching again. Every room, every wall. I found hints, small ones. A gap in the baseboard where none should be. Scuff marks on the floor in an otherwise untouched corridor. And behind a large wardrobe on the second floor, a patch of wall with no seams, but colder than the rest of the room. I placed my palm against it. Nothing. But then I let my mind wander. I let go of what I was doing, what I was thinking. And when I blinked, the wall was no longer there. It was a door, unpainted, no handle, just a keyhole. I didn't remember pulling the key from my pocket, but suddenly it was in my hand. A long iron one, older than the rest. Ornate, heavy. I inserted it and turned. The door creaked open into pitch darkness. The air smelled of damp stone, aged paper, and something else, faintly sweet and rotting, like wilted flowers left too long in stagnant water. I stepped inside. No light followed. The door closed behind me without a sound. I was underground. A narrow corridor sloped downward, the walls lined with carvings, not etched with tools, but clawed out with fingers. Hundreds of them. Names. Dates. Please, let me out. Remember me. Her eyes never close. I kept walking, one hand on the wall, the other gripping the small lantern I'd taken from the kitchen. It offered barely enough light to show the ground in front of me. Eventually, the corridor opened into a large circular chamber, and in the center, a chair. A simple wooden chair, facing a stone wall. Upon the wall, painted in a deep crimson that had faded to rust, were more words, neater this time, deliberate. The house does not forgive. I stepped forward. The chair was not empty. A body sat slumped, skeletal, dressed in decayed linen, head bowed. In its lap, a book. The second half of Clara's diary. I reached for it, hands trembling. The moment I touched the cover, the lantern died. And in the sudden darkness, I heard her voice. Not in the room. In my head. Now you remember. But do you know? The air grew thick. My lungs struggled. I turned to leave, but the corridor was gone, replaced by solid stone. I wasn't trapped. Not physically, but I understood now. This wasn't a place. It was a loop. Fredrick hadn't built the house to trap memory. He had built it to preserve guilt. His, Clara's, and now mine. The room was a memory cell, and the only way out was to forget again. I closed my eyes. I let the story slip. Names, faces, sounds. Let them drift. And when I opened my eyes again, I was back in the parlor. The fire was out. The diary was gone. But in the mirror above the mantel, Clara was watching. And she smiled. Her smile wasn't cruel. That would have been easier to face. No, it was a smile of recognition. of completion, like a sculptor stepping back from the final chisel stroke and saying, "Yes, that's what I meant to make." I stared at her for a long time, unsure if I was more afraid of her or what she saw in me. Because when I looked into her eyes in the mirror, I felt nothing alien. I felt familiarity, and that terrified me. I tried to shake the feeling. I opened every window in the house, even as a cold wind crept through the halls like fingers brushing the walls. I played music, loud, brass jazz from my phone, anything that didn't belong in this place. I even shouted, once, just to hear something living echo off the walls. But the house swallowed every sound. I stopped checking the mirrors. Instead, I focused on what little remained of Clara's writings, those half-burned pages from the fireplace, the ones she'd hidden even from herself. They spoke of dreams repeating, of voices slipping through walls, of a man, Fredrick, who thought love meant never letting go. He said if I stayed, I'd be eternal, that he'd remember me forever. But I didn't want to be a statue in his mausoleum. That word again, mausoleum. I thought of the photographs. The way her face was always blurred, not by damage, but by refusal. She had erased herself, and the house was punishing her for it. That night, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not heavy ones, soft, delicate. Then the humming again, the lullaby, this time slower, like a phonograph winding down. I sat in bed, motionless, as it passed my door, stopped, and continued down the hall. I counted the seconds, 20, 30, then silence. I rose and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but every mirror on the wall, 5 in total, had cracked. Not shattered, just a single clean fracture across the center of each. A dividing line. 2 cells. Me and the other me. I returned to the parlor. The mirror above the fireplace was intact. Clara still stood behind the glass, but she no longer smiled. She whispered. I couldn't hear it at first, only saw her lips move. But gradually, as I stepped closer, I felt the sound more than I heard it. Not in my ears, in my bones. Do you want to leave? A question. My throat was dry. My voice came out cracked. Yes. Her head tilted, then finished the house. I didn't understand, until I looked down at the floor and saw the blueprint. It hadn't been there before. Laid out beneath the mirror, on the stone hearth, was a fresh architectural plan. Unaged, unweathered. Fredrick's style is incomplete. Rooms missing. Doors disconnected. Notes scrawled in red. Complete the memory. Seal the story. Then the house will sleep again. I took the blueprint to study. I began sketching. I filled in the missing rooms based on Clara's diary, Fredrick's journals, and the strange places I'd already seen. The impossible staircases, the window to the forgotten garden, the chamber beneath the floor. As I drew, the house groaned, like it knew what I was doing. The boards flexed. The light dimmed. Dust fell from the ceiling. I added one final room, a mirror chamber, at the center of the structure. No doors, just reflections. The place where Clara had been held, where memory looped, where names faded. I circled it in ink and wrote one word beneath. End. When I looked up, the house was silent. Still, I returned to the parlor. Clara was gone. The mirror was clay, and in it, I saw only myself. Tired, pale, unchanged. I left the house that morning. For the first time, it didn't try to stop me. No voices, no whispers, no shadows at the edge of my sight. Just silence. But before I closed the front door behind me, I turned, and in the mirror by the entryway, she was there again, smiling. But this time, I smiled back. I didn't go home. I drove, yes, away from Ashwood, the road unfolding behind me like a long exhale, but not home. I stopped at a roadside inn an hour out, with dusty windows and a night manager who barely looked up from her crossword when I asked for a room. I told myself I needed rest, but in truth, I was afraid of waking up in that house again. Like all of this, leaving, driving, escaping, was just part of another memory loop. A trick of the walls. A dream borrowed from Clara. I didn't sleep that night. Not fully. And when morning came, I checked the blueprint again. I don't remember packing it. But there it was, folded neatly on the dresser. Still warm, somehow, like it had been freshly printed from a press that no longer existed. I spread it out instead, and that's when I saw it. Fredrick Ashwood had left a signature, not on the main floor, not in the attic or cellar, but buried deep in the outer edge of the foundation, almost invisible unless you were tracing the walls yourself. A mark, a monogram, F.A., and beneath it, a phrase in Latin, Memoria Manet. Memory remains. I knew then what I had to do. I had to find out who he was, not as an architect, not as Clara's husband, but as a man. What drives someone to build a house that remembers? I returned to the city, spent days at the university archives, the municipal records office, dusty basements filled with blueprints, land grants, death certificates. Fredrick Ashwood was a name buried under time, but I found traces. Born 1864, son of a stonemason, taught himself drafting before the age of 14. Built his first structure, a chapel, by 19. They say it collapsed during the first service. No one died. But after that, his buildings changed. More ornate, more intentional. Each one included unusual features. Rooms with no entrances, staircases leading to nothing, echo chambers, asymmetrical basements. He claimed it was art. I found letters. To Clara, some preserved in city archives, others in a private collection kept by a historian who thought they were forged. But I recognized the handwriting, the language. If the mind forgets, the house will remember. It must. Or else what were we for? Fredrick didn't build for people. He built for memory. But memory is a dangerous foundation. It shifts. It resists walls. It seeps into wood and whispers through cracks. And if you live inside it long enough, you stop being yourself. Clara wrote it in her final entries. He thought he was building a monument. He didn't see he was building a trap. A house cannot love, but it can cling. I found Fredrick's death certificate 1899. Age 35. Cause, unknown collapse inside his own home. The body was found alone. But here's the part that chilled me. The house listed on the death certificate wasn't Ashwood. It was somewhere else. Another property. Destroyed by fire. Ashwood was built after. The same blueprints. The same rooms. Clara had survived him and rebuilt the house. Or maybe the house rebuilt itself. I drove back to Ashwood, not because I wanted to, because I had to. There were still questions, still voices, still unfinished rooms. I unlocked the front door. It didn't creak this time. It welcomed me, and waiting in the foyer, standing beneath the untouched chandelier, was a man in a long black coat, unmoving, expression unreadable, and though I'd never seen a photo of him, I knew. Fredrick, alive, in a way memory permits. He said nothing, only toned, and began walking toward the study. I followed him. He walked without sound. No creak of floorboards, no weight in his step, just the steady glide of a man who had walked this house too many times to disturb it. Fredrick led me to the study, the same room I had sat in just nights ago, tracing blueprints, chasing ghosts in ink and paper. But now the study was not as I remembered. It had changed. The desk, larger, older, carved from wood I couldn't name, was set with instruments I didn't recognize. Strange compasses, rulers bent in impossible arcs, lenses embedded in brass. And on the wall behind the desk, a massive architectural diagram stretched from ceiling to floor. It wasn't just Ashwood. It was every house he had ever built. Merged, interwoven, a single, massive, impossible structure that spiraled and folded into itself. And at the center, marked in red ink, was one word. Clara. Fredrick turned and faced me. His eyes were not empty. They burned, not with warmth, but with will. like coals refusing to die. He spoke only once. "Do you understand now?" And I did. He hadn't built the house for Clara. He built it from her. Every memory he feared losing, every moment, every argument, every lullaby, every silence, was carved into wood and stone. Room by room, wall by wall, Clara had tried to leave. And when she did, he used her absence as a blueprint. Ashwood was never meant to be a home. It was a reconstruction, a way to freeze her, to contain what had already slipped away. He gestured to the diagram behind him. His hand touched one corner, one tower, and it lit with a faint red glow. Then another, until the entire blueprint pulsed with faint light, like veins carrying memory through a body made of walls. "She's still here," he said, "but not whole." I asked him then what he wanted from me. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, and on the desk before me, I saw it, a blank blueprint. Fresh parchment, empty lines, waiting, and beside it, a pencil, not a modern one, wooden, sharpened by blade, its point resting against the paper like it already knew where to begin. He was asking me to build, to finish what he could not, to help him bring her back, entirely, not as a whisper in mirrors, but whole, and something in me, something deep, considered it, because I'd felt her too. The weight of her sorrow, the trace of her hand, the clarity of her voice in the dark. I knew her better than I knew some people I'd loved. But I remembered her words. "The house does not love. It holds." And I remembered the feeling in that mirror. That smile. It wasn't joy. It was release. Clara didn't want to be remembered like this. She wanted to be forgotten. So I did the only thing I could. I lit a match, held it to the corner of the blueprint. The flame hesitated, then took. The fire spread quickly, up the paper, across the diagram, to the strange instruments and ancient vellum. Heat filled the study. Smoke curled against the ceiling. I stepped back. Fredrick watched it burn. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood, silent, his face expressionless. And then, he began to fade. Not like a spirit, like memory. Dust on a bookshelf finally disturbed. He was never meant to live this long inside the house. And with the last of the plans gone, he let go. When the fire died, there was no ash. Only a single line drawn into the floor. A door, closed, and across it, etched in the wood. "Do not open." I left the study, closed the door behind me. The mirrors in the hallway were all intact now. Clara's reflection was gone. But in their place were mine. 10 of them, all facing me, all waiting. They watched me. 10 of me, across 10 mirrors. Not reflections, no. Reflections move when you move. Mimic, echo, follow. These didn't. Some stood slightly off. A tilt of the head, a change in the eyes. One even blinked when I didn't. I stepped back. Only the mirror behind me followed. That one, that was me. The rest, I didn't know. I walked away quickly, back through the hallway, through the rooms I now recognized but no longer trusted. The house felt different, emptier somehow, but more alert, like it had been sleeping with one eye open and was now, finally, awake. The silence was heavier, and somewhere in that silence, beneath the creaks and sighs of old wood, I could hear something, breathing, but not mine. It came from below, beneath the first floor, under the cellar, a space not on any blueprint, even the most complete ones. A space with no label, no history, no name. I found the door behind the shelves in the old linen closet, a square cut into the stone, framed by black iron. No handle, only a latch, slick with condensation and rust. I knew I shouldn't open it, but the house had shown it to me for a reason. I pulled. The door opened on its own. Inside, a spiral stairwell, descending in tight circles, farther than should be possible in a house this size. I stepped in. The door closed behind me. I descended slowly, counting each step. 30, 60, 90. The air grew colder with each turn. My breath became mist. The walls were bare, rough stone, carved not by hand, but by time. At the bottom was a landing, and beyond it, a room. No doors, no windows, just space, dimly lit by a soft, sourceless glow that made everything look the same shade of gray. At the center, a pedestal. Upon it, a book. Not a journal, not a diary, a ledger, the kind used by accountants or prison clerks. I opened it. Every page was filled, not with names, with versions. 10 entries per page. Slight variations. Minor changes. Subject recalls mirror event. Subject burns blueprint. Subject refuses memory graft. Subject joins design. Subject leaves door closed. The ledger was tracking outcomes. Attempts. Failures. Choices. And every one ended the same way. Integration. Incomplete. Until the last page. There was a new entry. Still warm. Ink not yet dry. Subject opened the door to the nameless room. Below that, one final line. Integration pending. I looked up. There were no mirrors here, but I didn't need them. I could feel it. The house wasn't watching me anymore. It was inside me, waiting, not to trap, to complete. Because I wasn't just the visitor. I was a final draft. The one who had seen every room, read every line, heard every echo. Clara was memory. Fredrick was intent. But me? I was the witness. And witnesses remember, whether they want to or not. I closed the ledger, and for the first time, the house did not resist me. It released me. I climbed the stairs, step by step, back toward the surface. The door opened on its own, and the hallway beyond was empty. No mirrors, no breathing, no Clara, no Fredrick, just me, and silence. I didn't expect it to feel peaceful. I'd climbed out of a room that shouldn't exist, left behind a ledger that wrote my life like it had already happened, and stood now in a hallway I had walked a dozen times. Only now, it was hollow, empty. The house was still, and so was I. But peace, I've learned, doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes peace is just the space between thunder and the storm that follows. I moved through the house, retracing every step, every room, every flicker of the past. The piano in the sitting room. Keys dusty, but not untouched. The window with the impossible view, now dark, its garden withered and gone. The parlor mirror, cracked in a way that looked deliberate now, like a seam waiting to open. I knew what was coming. I just didn't know how it would come. Because I had seen the ledger, and I understood what integration meant. It wasn't about becoming part of the house. It was about the house becoming part of me. I stood in the entryway. One mirror left. The original. The first one. The one where Clara had stood. It was no longer fogged. No longer flickering. It was clay. And in it, I saw myself. But not the self I remembered. My eyes, slightly darker. My posture, straightener. My mouth, calm. Not my reflection. My replacement. I raised my hand. So did he. I tilted my head. So did he. But when I stepped back, he did not follow. I froze. And he smiled. Then spoke. The house is done. 3 words, spoken from behind glass. And as soon as he said them, the house sighed. Every board, every beam, every wall, all at once. Like something vast and ancient had been holding its breath for years. And now, finally, it could rest. Then I saw them. Behind my reflection, no, his reflection, shadows moved. Dozens, hundreds, shapes without detail. Not threatening, just there. Versions, iterations, every choice that could have been made, every step left unchosen. They stood in silent witness, just beyond the frame, watching, waiting, and I realized what had happened. I wasn't the first to burn the blueprint, or to descend the stair, or to read the ledger. I was just the one who reached the end and didn't turn back. And for that, The house had accepted me. As memory. As blueprint. As record. I didn't scream. Didn't resist. There was no violence in this ending. Only inevitability. He, my mirror double, lifted his hand again. Only this time. He pressed his palm against the glass. And I understood. One last choice. One final step. I reached forward and touched the mirror. The sensation was like falling without motion, like drowning in stillness. And then, light, but not warm, not bright. A light that illuminates truth, not comfort. And in that light, I saw every room again. Not as they were, but as they remembered themselves. The wallpaper that peeled where Clara once cried. The hollow in the staircase where Fredrick had carved her initials and sanded them away. The parlor that once held music, now echoing only memory. And in the center of it all, me, but not moving. Still, in place, like a photograph hung in a hallway that no one walks in anymore. Now I speak only through walls, through glass, through dreams left unfinished. If you hear me, it's not because I'm haunting you. It's because the house needs you to remember. And if you remember too clearly, you may never leave. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you don't miss part 2, where the letters left behind begin to speak, and the mystery truly begins to unfold.